When a being who perceives all moments simultaneously encounters a world where death is merely an inconvenience, where magic flows like water, and where gods walk among mortals, reality itself must reconcile the impossible. What happens when absolute quantum certainty meets a universe built on chaos, faith, and the endless cycle of war? What occurs when a man who became a god through atomic fire enters a realm where gods are born from belief and can die by the sword? A flash of cerulean light tore through the fabric of reality above the gleaming spires of Stormwind City. It was neither the verdant green of druidic magic nor the arcane purple of magecraft. This was something else, something that should not exist in Azeroth. The light appeared without warning in the heart of the Valley of Heroes, mere meters from the throne room where King Anduin Wrynn held court. Ancient protective wards woven by the Kirin Tor and blessed by the light itself registered nothing until the moment of breach. No alarm, no premonition from the priests, simply a localized failure of reality's fundamental structure. In the wake of this impossible illumination stood a figure, humanoid, male, completely hairless, nude, his skin the color of a clear elven sky, glowing with internal radiance that seemed to emanate from every atom of his being. He hovered several centimeters above the cobblestone streets, observing his surroundings with an expression of detached curiosity. Citizens screamed and scattered. Children pointed before being pulled away by terrified parents. Market stalls were abandoned as vendors fled toward the safety of stone buildings. Within seconds, a contingent of Stormwind guards surrounded the figure, their swords and rifles aimed at his chest. Their captain, a grizzled veteran named Marcus Thorn, stepped forward with his weapon leveled. "Identify yourself, intruder. By order of King Anduin Wrynn, you are to state your purpose or be considered hostile to the Alliance." The blue figure turned slowly, his movements fluid yet somehow disconnected, as if his body were merely a suggestion rather than a solid form. His eyes were white voids, pupilless, irisless, yet somehow seeing everything, every atom, every quantum possibility in the space around him. "I am called Dr. Manhattan," he replied, his voice calm and measured, like a scientist recording observations in a laboratory. "Though I suspect that name carries no meaning in this reality." Before Captain Thorn could respond, a surge of golden light erupted from the Cathedral of Light. Every guard dropped to one knee as the overwhelming presence of the light washed over them. Not in aggression, but in investigation. Priests and paladins came running from the cathedral, their eyes wide with confusion and wonder. Even the blue intruder seemed to notice, turning his gaze toward the massive structure that dominated Stormwind's skyline. "Interesting," Dr. Manhattan said, his voice unchanged despite the holy power pressing against him. "There is energy here, not electromagnetic, not nuclear, something that exists in response to consciousness, to belief. It examines me as I examine it." A figure materialized in a flash of arcane light, staff crackling with barely contained power. Jaina Proudmoore, Lord Admiral of Kul Tiras, and one of the most powerful mages in Azeroth, stood before Manhattan with ice forming in the air around her fingertips. Beside her, arriving on winds of lightning, was Thrall, former war chief of the Horde, the elements themselves responding to his will. "What manner of being are you?" Jaina demanded, her voice steady despite the unprecedented nature of the intrusion. "No portal magic brought you here. No spell I know could breach Stormwind's defenses so completely." Manhattan turned his white gaze upon her, studying her molecular structure, the arcane energy flowing through her body, the way magic in this universe seemed to bend reality rather than work within its rules. "I am not native to this universe. In my reality, I was human once. An accident involving subatomic particle manipulation separated my consciousness from physical form, then allowed me to reconstruct myself. I exist as both matter and energy, perceiving time non-sequentially." Thrall's eyes narrowed, his connection to the elements showing him something unusual about this being. The spirits whispered of impossibility, of something that should not exist within the natural order. The elements are confused by you. They cannot read you. It is as if you exist outside the flow of life and death that connects all things. Accurate observation, Manhattan replied. I perceive that this world operates on principles fundamentally different from my own universe. Here, what you call magic appears to be manipulation of reality through will and belief. Resurrection of the dead occurs routinely. Souls are tangible things that can be captured, stored, transferred. Fascinating. Jaina exchanged a glance with Thrall. Despite their factions' complicated history, both recognized the gravity of this moment. You speak of our world as if you're conducting an experiment, she said carefully. I am observing, Manhattan corrected. I did not choose to come here. I was traveling between universes when something intercepted me. A dimension that exists alongside physical reality, filled with beings of immense hunger and malevolence. My passage through it was unplanned. At that moment, King Anduin Wrynn emerged from the throne room, flanked by elite guards and advisors. The young king, bearing the weight of leadership beyond his years, approached with caution but without visible fear. Behind him walked Gen Greymane in human form, his werewolf nature held in check by decades of discipline, and Matthias Shaw, master of SI-7, whose eyes missed nothing. I am Anduin Wrynn, High King of the Alliance, the young monarch announced. Lord Admiral Proudmoore and Warchief Thrall are correct to question your presence. But I sense no malice from you, only curiosity. The light shows me something unprecedented. You are neither living nor dead in the way we understand such things. Manhattan inclined his head slightly. Your perception is accurate, King Anduin. I exist in a quantum superposition of states. In my universe, I am the only being of my kind. Here, I sense I am not as unique as I once believed. This world contains many entities that defy conventional physics. What do you want? Gen growled, his voice carrying the gravelly undertone of his curse. Why have you come to Stormwind? I have no wants. Manhattan replied simply, I am here because I am here. But now that I observe this reality, I find myself curious about its structure. Your planet, Azeroth, is itself a nascent titan, a world soul gestating within the planetary core. Yet it has been wounded, corrupted, fought over by forces that wish to claim or destroy it. The metaphysical architecture is complex. Silence fell over the gathered leaders. Knowledge of Azeroth's nature as a titan world soul was not public information, known only to the most learned scholars and powerful beings. For this stranger to perceive it immediately upon arrival spoke to abilities beyond anything they had encountered. Matthias Shaw stepped forward, his assassin's instincts screaming danger despite the being's passive demeanor. How do you know this? I see it, Manhattan stated. I perceive matter and energy at the subatomic level. Your world's core contains a consciousness of immense complexity, currently unconscious but aware on some fundamental level. I can map its neural pathways, such as they are. The corruption within it registers as a quantum entanglement with extra-dimensional entities you would recognize as old gods, though their physical forms have been destroyed. Thrall's expression darkened. The old gods were among Azeroth's most ancient threats, beings of the void that had imprisoned and corrupted the Titan's creation. That this stranger could perceive their lingering influence so easily was both impressive and terrifying. If you can see such things, then you must also see the danger you represent simply by being here. Power draws attention in Azeroth, and there are forces that would seek to use you, corrupt you, or destroy you. For the first time, Manhattan's expression changed slightly, a faint suggestion of what might have been a smile. I have encountered such forces already. During my transit, beings of vast psychic power attempted to make contact with my consciousness. They exist in the dimension adjacent to physical reality, feeding on emotion and belief. They perceived me as potential sustenance or threat. They were mistaken on both counts. Jaina's blood ran cold. You're speaking of the Void Lords, the entities that created the old gods, that seek to corrupt all Titan world souls. Perhaps, Manhattan acknowledged. The entities I encountered exist in a state of non-physical reality, their consciousness distributed across what you might call the void. They attempted to establish connection with my mind. I observed their attempt, then declined participation. One does not simply decline the Void Lords, Gin said flatly. I do not exist by their rules. Manhattan replied, my consciousness is not vulnerable to psychic manipulation because it exists as a quantum phenomenon rather than a biological one. They cannot corrupt what they cannot comprehend. Before anyone could respond, the air itself seemed to darken. Not physically, but metaphysically, as if hope itself were being drained from the atmosphere. The temperature dropped precipitously. Frost formed on weapons and armor. Citizens who had been watching from windows began to scream. From the shadows between buildings, figures emerged. Not natural shadows, but tears in reality itself, wounds in the fabric of space through which something ancient and malevolent pressed its awareness. The whispers began immediately, voices that spoke directly into the mind, bypassing ears entirely, promising power, knowledge, the fulfillment of every dark desire. The old gods, Anduin breathed, his hand instinctively reaching for the light. Even dead, their essence remains. Manhattan observed the phenomenon with interest, not the entities themselves. Echoes, resonances left behind by their existence. This world's reality has been scarred by their presence, creating persistent patterns in the quantum foam. Fascinating. They continue to influence events despite lacking physical or even conscious form. The shadows coalesced into vaguely humanoid shapes, tentacles writhing where limbs should be, eyes opening and closing across their forms in defiance of biological possibility. They spoke in unison, 1,000 voices overlapping. The anomaly, the intruder from beyond, the blue god who is no god. You do not belong. You upset the balance. You must be consumed or destroyed. Manhattan raised his hand, and complex patterns of blue energy formed around it, atomic structures orbiting like miniature solar systems. You are remnants, fragments of deceased entities. You lack the coherence to threaten me, but your existence provides useful data about this universe's fundamental nature. The shadow things lunged forward with impossible speed, their forms shifting and changing as they moved, reality bending around them. They never reached Manhattan. The blue figure simply gestured, and the atomic bonds holding the shadow constructs together ceased to exist. They dissolved into nothingness, not destroyed so much as unmade, reduced to their component particles and scattered. Impressive, Jaina said, lowering her staff slightly. Those manifestations would have required a coordinated strike from multiple mages to dispel. You simply unmade them. I rearranged their atomic structure, Manhattan explained. What you perceive as shadow was matter held in a state of quantum uncertainty, neither fully material nor fully energy. I resolved the uncertainty by collapsing the probability wave into a dispersed state. Thrall and Jaina exchanged another glance. The being spoke of magic as if it were science, reducing the fundamental forces of Azeroth to mathematical equations. It was simultaneously enlightening and deeply unsettling. We need to take this to the others, Anduin decided. If the old god's remnants are already aware of him, then other powers will be soon as well. The Horde, the Burning Legion if any remain, the forces of death. We need to understand what his presence means for Azeroth. Manhattan nodded. A gathering of your leadership seems logical. I am curious to observe how different factions respond to unprecedented phenomena. Within hours, a summit had been convened in Dalaran, the floating city of mages that served as neutral ground between Alliance and Horde. The short notice was unprecedented, but the circumstances demanded it. In the Chamber of Air, leaders from across Azeroth gathered around a massive circular table. each faction eyeing the others with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Anduin sat at one end, flanked by Jaina, Gin, Tyrande Whisperwind of the Night Elves, and other Alliance leaders. Across from them, the Horde was represented in force. At their head sat Thrall, who had come out of semi-retirement for this crisis. Beside him were Bane Bloodhoof, High Chieftain of the Torn, Thalyssra of the Nightborn, and First Arcanist Thalyssra. Lorthamar Theron represented the Blood Elves, and even the enigmatic G. Firepaw of the Pandaren had made the journey. Standing in the center of the chamber, untouched by the political tensions surrounding him, was Dr. Manhattan. He rotated slowly, observing each leader with his white, pupilless eyes, reading their biological signatures, their emotional states expressed through chemical reactions in their brains. "Let me understand," Bane rumbled, his deep voice carrying the weight of Tauren wisdom. "This being appeared from nowhere, bypassed every defense we possess, and claims to be from another universe entirely." "That is accurate," Manhattan confirmed. "I originate from a reality with different fundamental laws. In that universe, I was unique. Here, I find uniqueness is relative. Your world contains many beings of significant power operating on principles unfamiliar to me." Thalyssra leaned forward, her ageless eyes sharp with arcane knowledge. "You speak of magic as if it's foreign to you, yet you wield power that surpasses even the greatest magisters. How is this possible?" "I do not use magic," Manhattan explained. "I manipulate matter directly at the quantum level. I perceive the fundamental forces that bind atoms together and can alter them through will translated into physical action. In your terms, it might appear magical, but it is simply physics at scales you cannot typically perceive or influence. There are those who would argue magic is simply science we don't yet understand," Jaina offered. "A reasonable perspective," Manhattan acknowledged. "But from my observation, your magic operates differently. It bends reality through will and often requires belief or emotional investment. My abilities function regardless of belief. They are mechanical, reproducible, based on the underlying structure of existence itself." Tyrande, who had been silent until now, spoke with the authority of 10,000 years. "You say you did not choose to come here, yet here you are. The universe does not work by accident, even if your presence was unplanned. What will you do now that you have arrived?" Manhattan considered the question for a moment, his consciousness simultaneously perceiving this moment and moments, weeks, months ahead, seeing probability branches split and diverge with each decision. "I will observe, learn. This universe presents phenomena I have not encountered. Your resurrection of the dead, for instance. In my universe, death was absolute. Here, souls persist after physical death, can be recalled, reborn. The mechanics fascinate me. The dead should rest," Tyrande said sharply, pain evident in her voice. The Night Elf leader had lost much in recent conflicts, and the wounds remained fresh. "Resurrection is a gift of the light or the powers of nature, not something to be studied like an insect under glass." "I mean no disrespect," Manhattan replied, "but from my perspective, all phenomena warrant study. Understanding leads to possibility." Lorthamar straightened in his seat. "And what if your studies attract unwanted attention? The Blue One has already drawn the interest of old god remnants. What happens when the Burning Legion learns of him? Or the jailer in the Shadowlands?" "The Burning Legion," Manhattan repeated, accessing the fundamental information structure of reality itself, reading patterns in the quantum foam left by major events. A crusade led by fallen titans to destroy all world souls before they can awaken, preventing the Void Lords from corrupting them. Led by Sargeras, currently imprisoned within the seat of the Pantheon. Yes, I perceive this. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Knowledge of Sargeras's current state was closely guarded, known only to the most informed leaders. That Manhattan could simply perceive it was beyond troubling. "How?" demanded Gen. How can you know this? I observe reality at its most fundamental level. Manhattan said, major events leave impressions in space-time, quantum signatures that persist. I can read them as you might read a book. The demon Sargeras attempted to pierce Azeroth's core, was stopped by your champions, and is now held in stasis by the remaining Titans. This occurred recently in your temporal perception. Bane stood, his massive frame towering even among the assembled leaders. If you can see the past, can you see the future? Can you tell us what threatens Azeroth next? I perceive probability, Manhattan clarified. In my universe, I experienced all moments simultaneously, past, present, and future occurring at once. Here, the phenomenon is less clear. Your magic, your belief, constantly creates new possibilities, branching timelines. But I can observe the most probable outcomes. Then tell us, Anduin urged, leaning forward. What do you see? Manhattan was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant, seeing beyond the physical space of the chamber. I see war, as is constant in this world. I see the jailer of the damned attempting to rewrite the fundamental rules of reality, seeking to impose order on chaos, death on life, ending the cycle your universe has followed since its inception. I see champions rising to stop him. I see victory purchased at terrible cost. The leaders exchanged grave looks. Rumors of disturbances in the Shadowlands, the realm of death, had been circulating for weeks. If this being confirmed those fears, can you stop it? Jaina asked directly. If you possess such power, could you prevent this threat? Perhaps, Manhattan acknowledged. But should I? I am an observer here, not a participant. My intervention would fundamentally alter the trajectory of your reality in ways I cannot fully predict. Every action has consequences that ripple forward through time. Spoken like someone who has never lost a home, Tyrande said bitterly, never watched their people burn. Manhattan turned his full attention to her. I have watched my entire universe die. I witnessed the heat death of reality itself, the final proton decay, the ultimate victory of entropy. I have known loss, High Priestess, but I have also learned that some events must occur for others to become possible. Interference, even well-intentioned, can cause more harm than inaction. Before Tyrande could respond, the chamber's wards flared with warning light. Khadgar, the archmage of the Kirin Tor, materialized in a flash of purple energy, his expression grave. We have a situation. The Burning Legion. A massive force has appeared in the twisting nether, larger than anything since Argus. They're converging on Dalaran's position. Thrall rose immediately. How is that possible? Sargeras is imprisoned. The Legion's leadership is scattered. They're being led by the Eredar Lords, Khadgar explained quickly. Archimonde and Kil'jaeden may be dead, but others remain, and they're not alone. Reports indicate forces from the Void, shadow creatures that shouldn't exist alongside demons. Something has united them. Manhattan observed the rising panic with detached interest. They have detected me. The probability was high. Entities of sufficient power can sense anomalies in reality structure. My presence here represents a significant anomaly. You're saying they're coming for you? Gin demanded. Correct. I represent an unknown factor, a potential threat to their plans. The logical response is elimination. Anduin stood, his young face set with determination. Then we'll fight them together. Dalaran's defenses are strong, and with the Alliance and Horde forces present for this summit. Your forces will be insufficient, Manhattan interrupted. The entities approaching number in the hundreds of thousands. Greater demons, void constructs, beings from the twisting nether that have never set foot in physical reality. They have calculated overwhelming force is necessary. Then what do we do? Bane asked. You survive, Manhattan said simply. I will address this threat. Before anyone could object, Manhattan's form began to shimmer. Then, impossibly, he split. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8, until dozens of identical blue figures stood in a circle around the chamber, each one moving independently, yet in perfect coordination. I can divide my consciousness as needed, all the Manhattans said in perfect unison, their voices overlapping to create an echoing effect. Each duplicate possesses my full awareness and capability. I will engage the hostile forces. You should evacuate non-combatants from Dalaran. We don't run from demons, Jaina said firmly, ice already forming around her hands. I am not asking you to run, Manhattan replied, his duplicates beginning to vanish one by one as they teleported to different locations around Dalaran. I am asking you to not interfere. Your magical attacks will likely prove ineffective, and your presence would complicate my response. Only one Manhattan remained now, hovering in the center of the chamber. I will not allow these entities to harm your civilians to reach me. Consider this my first intervention in your reality, a test, perhaps, of whether I should become more involved in Azeroth's conflicts. With that, he vanished in a flash of blue light. The sky above Dalaran turned black. Not the black of night, but the absolute darkness of the void itself, reality being torn open to allow passage of things that should not exist in physical space. From these wounds in the cosmos, they came. The Burning Legion poured forth first. Fell reavers, massive mechanical constructs 3 stories tall, their eye beams capable of vaporizing stone. Doomguards by the hundreds, their wings blotting out what little light remained. Wrathguards with their hooked blades, Moarg engineers with devastating weapons. Pit lords whose very presence corrupted the land beneath their hooves. Behind them came something worse. Void creatures, beings of living shadow and madness, their forms constantly shifting, impossible to look upon without feeling one's sanity fray. Faceless ones, the old gods' servants, somehow returned despite their masters' deaths. Shadow constructs that defied categorization, amalgamations of nightmare made manifest, and leading them all, 3 figures of terrible power. The first was Talgeth, one of the Eredar lords who had survived the Legion's defeats, his mastery of fell magic unmatched among his kind. The second was a creature of the void whose name hurt to think, a being that existed partially outside normal space-time. The third was something that should not exist at all, an echo of Dimensius, the void lord that had consumed the ethereal's homeworld. They descended upon Dalaran expecting resistance, expecting the combined might of Azeroth's defenders to meet them in glorious battle. Instead, they found Dr. Manhattan. He hovered in the space above Dalaran's central spire, alone, his blue form tiny against the vast armada arrayed against him. The demons and void constructs paused, confused by the lack of opposition. You have come seeking my destruction, Manhattan observed, his voice somehow carrying across the battlefield despite speaking at normal volume. This is inefficient. I do not wish to destroy you, but I will not allow harm to come to the city below. Talgath laughed, a sound like mountains crumbling. You stand alone against the might of the Legion and the Void. Your arrogance will be your undoing, anomaly. I am stating fact, not displaying arrogance, Manhattan corrected. Observe. He raised one hand, and the atomic structure of reality around him became visible. Glowing lines of blue energy connecting every particle to every other particle, showing the fundamental lattice upon which physical existence was built. Then he closed his hand into a fist. Half the attacking force simply ceased to exist. Thousands of demons and void constructs, from the smallest imp to feel reavers the size of buildings, were unmade in an instant. Not killed, not banished, but broken down into component atoms and scattered across the twisting nether. The quantum bonds holding their forms together were dissolved by Manhattan's will. The remaining forces recoiled in shock and terror. Nothing could do that. No magic in Azeroth, No power of the Legion or Void could simply unmake matter on such a scale. You see, Manhattan continued, as if nothing significant had occurred, I do not fight as you understand fighting. I simply alter the state of matter. Your physical forms are collections of atoms held together by fundamental forces. I manipulate those forces directly. The void entity, whose name hurt to think, screamed in rage and lunged forward, its form expanding to fill the sky, tentacles of shadow reaching out to envelop Manhattan, to drag him into the void where physical laws did not apply. Manhattan did not move. As the tendrils touched him, they began to crystallize, solidifying from intangible shadow into physical matter. The void creature shrieked as its very nature was changed, forced into a physical state it had not held in eons. Manhattan was rewriting the rules of its existence, making it real, vulnerable. Your existence in a state of non-physical reality is a survival mechanism, Manhattan observed clinically. You avoid vulnerability by existing as pure concept, but I can force matter into any state I choose, including forcing non-matter to become matter. With a gesture, the void entity exploded into blue light, its consciousness forcibly bound into physical form and then dispersed, its sentience dissolved into component thoughts and scattered. The echo of Dimensius attacked next, attempting to consume Manhattan as it had consumed countless worlds. It opened voids in space designed to devour everything, pulling matter, energy, and even light into nothingness. Manhattan observed the phenomenon with interest. A pseudo-black hole formed through void manipulation, he noted. Not true gravitational collapse, but a similar effect achieved through reality warping. Ingenious. Then he stepped into the void, simply walked forward into the consuming darkness that had destroyed planets. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the void began to glow blue from within. Manhattan's atomic structure was generating so much energy that even the void could not contain it. The consuming darkness began to evaporate like fog before the sun. Your destruction mechanism cannot process my fundamental nature, Manhattan explained from within the collapsing void. I generate energy faster than you can consume it. The thermodynamics are unfavorable for you. The echo of Dimensius fled, recognizing an unwinnable scenario. Its consciousness retreated into the deep void, beyond the reach of physical reality, seeking escape. Manhattan allowed it to go. Observation complete. The void entities prioritize survival over victory. Logical. Only Talgath remained now, the Eridar Lord floating before Manhattan with fail fire crackling around his form. You are powerful, anomaly. I grant you this, but you do not understand the forces you have opposed. The Legion is eternal. We are inevitable. No, Manhattan replied. You are not. I have observed your history. The Burning Legion was created by Sargeras as a response to the threat of void corruption. A preventative extermination to save worlds from a fate he deemed worse than death. But Sargeras is imprisoned, and without his will driving you forward, you are simply refugees perpetuating a crusade that has lost its purpose. Talgath's expression twisted with rage. You dare. I observe and report fact, Manhattan interrupted. Your crusade has become self-sustaining genocide, divorced from its original intent. Sargeras sought to prevent the Void's victory. You simply destroy because destruction is all you know anymore. The Eridar Lord unleashed his full power, channeling fell energy sufficient to incinerate continents, pouring it all into a single concentrated blast aimed at Manhattan's chest. The green inferno engulfed the blue figure completely, the heat so intense that the air itself burned. When the flames cleared, Manhattan stood unchanged, his blue skin not even singed. Fell magic is impressive by local standards. It manipulates life force, corrupts, and empowers through stolen energy. But it is still bound by thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. You redirected and concentrated energy. I simply dispersed it at the atomic level before it could affect me. He raised his hand, and Talgath found himself frozen in place. Every molecule of his body held rigid by Manhattan's will. I could destroy you now, scatter your atoms across the cosmos, but I choose not to. You will carry a message to the remaining Legion forces. Tell them that Azeroth is under observation. Tell them that further aggression will be met with absolute response. Tell them that I, Dr. Manhattan, do not require anger or justice to act. I simply act when action is appropriate. Talgath's eyes widened in terror as he felt his body beginning to come apart at the seams, held together only by Manhattan's will. I will carry your message, the Eridar gasped. Manhattan released him, and Talgath fled through a portal into the twisting nether, his pride shattered, his power revealed as insufficient. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining demons and void constructs had already fled when their leaders fell or fled. Manhattan floated alone in the sky, surrounded by the faint blue mist that was all that remained of the thousands he had unmade. Below in Dalaran, every telescope, scrying orb, and watching eye had observed the battle. The leaders gathered in the Chamber of Air stood in stunned silence. He didn't even exert himself, Jaina whispered. That entire battle was like an academic exercise to him. The Burning Legion has terrorized Azeroth for thousands of years, Bane said, his voice shaken. They have destroyed countless worlds, and he defeated them in minutes, without effort. Anduin's expression was troubled. That kind of power, it could be used for great good, or terrible harm. How do we know which he will choose? Manhattan materialized in the chamber, appearing without fanfare or drama. I choose observation, he said, responding to Anduin's question as if he had been present for it. I did not act to save you out of altruism, but because the destruction of this city would have been inefficient. I am curious about Azeroth. Dead civilizations provide no data. Then you would have let us die if it served your curiosity? Tyrande demanded coldly. No, Manhattan replied after a moment's consideration. I find that I am not entirely without bias. My human origins, though distant, still influence my decisions. I prefer preservation to destruction, knowledge to ignorance, life to death. These are preferences, not imperatives, but they guide me nonetheless. Thrall stepped forward, his shaman's wisdom sensing something in the strange being before them. You are alone, are you not? The only one of your kind, in your universe, in ours. That loneliness shapes you more than you acknowledge. Manhattan's expression flickered, something almost like surprise crossing his features. Perceptive. Yes, I am alone, unique. In my universe, I eventually left because there was nothing new to observe, no one to understand my perspective. I sought novelty, difference. I found this universe by accident, but perhaps not entirely by chance. Then stay, Anduin said suddenly, not as a weapon or a tool, but as an observer. Learn about us. Let us learn about you. If your power can prevent invasions like today's, then perhaps your presence here is a blessing rather than a curse. I am inclined to accept, Manhattan replied. This universe presents many phenomena worthy of study, but I must warn you, my presence will continue to draw attention. The entities that attacked today were only the first. Others will come, seeking to understand me, use me, or destroy me. Let them come, Gen growled. We've faced worse. Have you? Manhattan asked mildly. I perceive threats you do not yet recognize. The jailer in the Shadowlands is aware of me now. His plan to remake reality views me as a significant variable. He will act against me. Khedgar stepped forward. If you truly can see the future, the probable outcomes, then tell us, can the jailer be stopped? Manhattan was silent for a long moment, his consciousness racing forward through probability branches, seeing countless versions of events yet to unfold. Yes, he finally said, but not by me. The jailer's power derives from death itself, from his position as arbiter of the Shadowlands. To defeat him requires those who understand death intimately, who have died and returned, who walk the line between life and the void beyond. Your champions will face him, and they will prevail, though the cost will be high. Can you not simply do what you did today? Jaina asked. Unmake him as you unmade the demons? I could attempt it, Manhattan acknowledged. But the jailer exists partially outside normal reality, in the realm of death. My power is most effective in physical space. In the Shadowlands, metaphysical rules apply that I am still learning. And more importantly, I have realized something since arriving here. He turned to look at each leader in turn. Your universe requires conflict to grow. The cycle of war, death, and rebirth is not simply destruction, it is evolution. Each crisis forces your people to adapt, to become stronger, to reach new heights of power and understanding. If I were to eliminate all threats, I would also eliminate the impetus for growth. Azeroth would stagnate. You speak of our suffering as if it's necessary, Tyrande said bitterly. I speak of the pattern I observe, Manhattan corrected gently. In my universe, I became so powerful that nothing could challenge me. I became stagnant, bored, disconnected. I stopped growing because there was nothing to grow against. Perhaps that is why I chose to leave. Bane nodded slowly, his Tauran wisdom recognizing truth in the words. The Earth Mother teaches that growth comes from challenge. The strongest trees grow where the wind blows hardest. Perhaps the Blue One speaks wisdom, even if it is hard to hear. Then what will you do? Anduin asked. If you will not fight all our battles for us, what role will you play? I will observe, Manhattan said. I will intervene when intervention serves understanding. When threats emerge that would destroy knowledge rather than test it. When the balance tips so far that growth becomes impossible. I will be a variable in your equations, not a constant. The leaders considered this, weighing the implications. An entity of immense power, willing to help but not to save, to act but not to control. It was perhaps the best outcome they could hope for, and far better than making an enemy of such a being. Then we have an accord, Anduin said formally. You may move freely through Alliance territories, observe what you wish, and we will not interfere with your studies. The Horde agrees, Thrall added, though I expect regular communication. Your insights into threats could save countless lives. Acceptable, Manhattan replied. I will share observations when appropriate, though I should note that my perception of time makes prediction complicated. I see what will probably happen, not what must happen. Your choices still matter. As the summit began to dissolve, leaders returning to their respective territories with much to discuss, Manhattan remained floating in the center of the chamber. A presence made itself known, not physical, but reaching across vast distances through means neither magical nor technological. The voice that spoke in his mind was ancient beyond measure, resonant with power. You are the anomaly, the quantum being who should not exist in this reality. Manhattan identified the source immediately. The Pantheon, the Council of Titans who had ordered the universe, now residing in their seat beyond normal space. They had been observing him, waiting to understand his nature before making contact. I am Dr. Manhattan, he replied, projecting his thoughts across the same channel. And you are the Titans, the architects of order in this universe. I have observed your works. Your presence disrupts the order we have carefully established. You operate on principles that defy our understanding. Are you aligned with the Void Lords? Do you seek to corrupt our creations? I am aligned with no one, Manhattan stated. I seek only to observe and understand. Your conflict with the Void Lords is ideological as much as physical. Order versus chaos, structure versus entropy. From my perspective, both are necessary components of reality. There was a pause, as if the Titans were conferring among themselves. When the voice returned, it carried a different tone, less accusatory, more curious. You defeated a burning legion assault with minimal effort. You perceive the world soul of Azeroth as we do. You exist outside the constraints that bind even us. What are you, truly? I am what remains when a human consciousness is forcibly separated from its physical form and given the power to manipulate matter at its most fundamental level. Manhattan explained, I am an accident that became permanent, a violation of natural law that persists through force of will. In my universe, I was a god by default. Here, I am merely unusual. There is nothing mere about your nature. Your power rivals ours, perhaps exceeds it in certain applications. The Void Lords will seek to corrupt you. Sargeras, were he free, would seek to recruit or destroy you. The Eternal Ones of Death will view you as a threat to their dominion. You have entered a cosmic game that has been played since the universe began. I am aware, Manhattan replied. I have no intention of taking sides in your conflicts, but I will not allow the destruction of Azeroth. I find this world interesting. Then our interests align, for now. But know this, quantum being. If you threaten the order we have established, if you become an agent of entropy rather than stability, we will be forced to act against you. Understood, Manhattan said, though I doubt you would succeed. Your power, while vast, operates through magical manipulation of physical reality. I manipulate the underlying structure that allows reality to exist. The hierarchy of scale favors me. The presence of the Titans withdrew, neither accepting nor rejecting his assessment. They had delivered their warning and received his response. What came next would depend on his actions. Manhattan departed Dalaran, materializing in Orgrimmar at Thrall's invitation. The former war chief led him to a secluded valley outside the city, where a small shrine stood surrounded by the elements in visible form. Water flowed without a source. Fire burned without fuel. Wind swirled in localized currents, and earth formed geometric patterns in the ground. This is a place of elemental convergence, Thrall explained, where the boundaries between physical and spiritual are thin. I am a shaman. I commune with the elements, ask them for their aid rather than command them. I thought you might find this interesting. Manhattan studied the phenomenon with intense focus. Fascinating. The elements you describe are not merely physical substances, but also possess consciousness, distributed awareness across countless instances of their form. Fire is not just combustion, but also the collective thought of all flames. That is one way to understand it. Thrall agreed. The elements are both thing and spirit, matter and mind. They do not think as we do, but they are aware, they feel, they remember. Manhattan extended his hand, and the elements reacted. Fire flickered toward him. Water spiraled up in defiance of gravity. Wind circled around his form, and earth rose in small clusters. But their approach was cautious, uncertain. They do not know what to make of me, Manhattan observed. I am matter, but not alive in the way they understand life. I possess consciousness, but it is structured differently than theirs. I am an anomaly to them as I am to you. The elements tell me something, Thrall said carefully. They say you carry the memory of death, not your own death, but the death of everything. They feel the ending in you. Manhattan lowered his hand, and the elements retreated. Accurate. I have witnessed the ultimate entropy of my universe. That experience is encoded in my consciousness. Perhaps the elements perceive this as a form of trauma. Is it not? Thrall asked gently. To watch everything die, to be unable to prevent it, to remain alone in the darkness. That would break any mind. My mind did not break, Manhattan replied. It simply adapted. I learned to accept entropy as the natural conclusion of all things. Endings are not inherently negative. They are transformations, change from one state to another. The elements would disagree, Thrall said with a slight smile. To them, change is necessary, but extinction is wrong. Life should beget life, endlessly cycling. That is the natural order they recognize. Perhaps they are correct, Manhattan conceded. My universe's ending may have been an aberration rather than inevitability. This universe, with its cycles of death and rebirth, may represent a more stable configuration. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the elements dance in their eternal patterns. Then Thrall spoke again. Why did you come to Orgrimmar? You could observe from a distance. I wish to understand the Horde more directly, Manhattan said. From orbit, I see only structures and movement patterns. But culture, philosophy, the elements that make a civilization what it is, these require closer observation. And what have you learned? That the Horde is not what I expected. Your history suggests constant warfare, aggression as a primary trait. But I observe community, loyalty, honor. You fight not because you love war, but because you love what you are protecting. An interesting distinction. Thrall's expression warmed slightly. The Alliance often misses that distinction. They see our strength and assume we desire conquest. Few take the time to understand us as you have in mere hours. Before Thrall could continue, a ripple passed through reality itself. Not magical, not physical, but something else. A disturbance in the fundamental structure of existence. Manhattan turned his gaze skyward, perceiving a breach forming in the barriers between worlds. The Shadowlands, he said quietly. The realm of death is bleeding into physical reality. The jailer moves forward with his plan. Thrall felt it too, his shaman senses screaming alarm. What is happening? The arbiter of the Shadowlands, the entity responsible for judging souls and sending them to their appropriate afterlives, has been incapacitated. The jailer, another eternal one who rules the prison realm called the Maw, has begun to seize control. He intends to breach the barriers between life and death, imposing his will on all of reality. Can you stop him? Thrall asked urgently. Manhattan was silent for a moment, his consciousness racing through probability matrices. I can delay him, but stopping him requires understanding his power at a fundamental level. To do that, I must enter the Shadowlands myself, observe the realm of death directly. That's insane, Thrall said flatly. The Shadowlands are for the dead. The living cannot enter except through specific means, and even then it drains the life force of mortals. I am neither alive nor dead in the way you understand such states, Manhattan replied. My consciousness exists independently of biological function. I should be able to enter without the typical restrictions. Should be, Thrall repeated with alarm. Certainty is impossible when dealing with metaphysical realms I have not yet studied, Manhattan admitted. But the probability of success is high. I will enter the Shadowlands, observe the jailer's mechanisms, and determine the optimal response. The champions of Azeroth will be going as well, Thrall said. They always rise to meet such threats. If you go, you may encounter them there. I look forward to observing them in action, Manhattan said. Heroes are an interesting phenomenon. Individuals who exceed their species' normal parameters through determination and circumstance. Your world produces them regularly. Without further warning, Manhattan's form began to shift. His blue glow intensified, and the atomic structure of his body began to vibrate at frequencies that allowed it to exist partially out of phase with normal reality. He was adjusting himself to match the metaphysical frequency of the Shadowlands. Wait, Thrall called. If you don't return, how will we know what happened? I will return, Manhattan stated with certainty. I have perceived multiple probability branches, and in none of them do I fail to return. The timeline may vary, but the outcome is consistent. Then he vanished, not with his usual flash of blue light, but with a sound like reality sighing, a brief moment of absolute silence as he transitioned between states of existence. The Shadowlands was unlike anything Manhattan had encountered. It was not simply a place, but a condition of existence, a realm where the rules of life did not apply but death had not yet concluded. Souls existed here in forms dictated by their beliefs and deeds, sorted into various realms by metaphysical principles. He materialized in Oribos, the eternal city at the heart of the Shadowlands, a nexus where all the realm's various zones connected. The city existed in a state of geometric impossibility, its architecture defying three-dimensional space, corridors leading to destinations that should be in opposite directions, stairs ascending and descending simultaneously. Fascinating, Manhattan observed, studying the architecture. Non-Euclidean geometry enforced by the metaphysical rules of this realm. The physical laws here are suggestions rather than requirements. His appearance caused immediate reaction. Souls flowing through the city stopped and stared. The stewards, strange automaton-like beings who managed the city's functions, approached with caution. Unknown entity detected. One steward intoned in a voice like grinding gears. Quantum signature does not match any known category, neither living nor dead, neither mortal nor eternal. Classification impossible. I am Dr. Manhattan. He introduced himself. I have entered this realm to observe and understand its structure. Impossible, another steward stated. The living cannot enter the Shadowlands without physical form. The dead cannot maintain consciousness without being processed through the arbiter. You are both and neither. Paradox. I exist in a state of quantum superposition, Manhattan explained patiently. Your categories do not apply to me. Where is the arbiter? I wish to observe the sorting mechanism. The stewards conferred among themselves in rapid binary-like communication. Finally, they responded. The arbiter is dormant. The sorting has ceased. All souls are being diverted to the maw. This is a crisis of unprecedented magnitude. Show me, Manhattan commanded gently. The stewards led him to the center of Oribos, where a massive chamber housed a being of incredible size and complexity. The arbiter stood frozen, a construct of pure purpose given form, currently locked in stasis. Above her, a stream of souls flowed continuously, but instead of being distributed to the appropriate afterlife realms, they were being pulled toward a dark vortex in the sky. Manhattan studied the arbiter with intense focus. A quantum processor given consciousness. Her purpose is singular. Evaluate souls and direct them based on criteria programmed by the first ones, the beings who created this realm. But she has been overloaded, forced into shutdown by something beyond her capacity to process. The first soul, a voice said from behind him. Manhattan turned to see a woman in elegant robes, her form suggesting mortality, but her presence indicating something more. The arbiter was damaged when the first soul was cast into the maw, a soul so vast, so powerful that it shattered her ability to judge. Manhattan studied the woman. You are a Venthyr, one of the factions that inhabits this realm, specifically the realm of Revendreth, where souls are forced to atone for their sins. Yet you are here in Oribos. Unusual. I am the accuser, the woman replied, and I have been watching you since you arrived. You are not dead, yet you walk the Shadowlands. How? I transcend the categories you use to define existence, Manhattan said. But more importantly, who was this first soul? What being could overwhelm a cosmic mechanism designed to process all mortal consciousness? The accuser's expression darkened. We do not know. The first one's creation is meant to be infallible, yet it failed, and in that failure, the jailer saw opportunity. The jailer, Manhattan repeated. The imprisoned eternal one who rules the maw. I wish to observe him. Impossible, the accuser said firmly. The maw is inescapable. Even we eternal ones cannot enter and return. Only the damned go there, and they never leave. Your rules do not bind me, Manhattan stated. With a thought, he began to teleport toward the dark vortex that led to the maw. Wait, the accuser called, but he was already gone. The maw was torment given form. Not physical torture, though that existed in abundance, but existential anguish. Souls trapped here existed in states of perpetual suffering, their worst fears and regrets made manifest, their consciousness unable to dissipate or find peace. Manhattan observed it all with clinical detachment. The landscape was a nightmare of twisted stone and eternal darkness, broken only by flows of anima, the sole energy that powered the Shadowlands. Chains hung from impossible angles, binding souls that had been deemed irredeemable. And at the center of it all, in a fortress called Torghast, the Tower of the Damned, was the jailer himself. Zovaal, the first of the Eternal Ones, sat upon a throne of chains and bone. His form was humanoid but titanic, easily 50 feet tall, his body covered in ancient armor that seemed fused to his flesh. Chains bound him, restrictions placed by his fellow Eternal Ones when they cast him into the maw eons ago. But those chains were breaking, slowly, as he accumulated power. The jailer's eyes opened as Manhattan approached, 2 points of blue light matching Manhattan's own glow. Impossible. Zovaal's voice rumbled like an avalanche. No living being can enter the maw. No dead soul can approach me with free will. What are you? I am observation given form, Manhattan replied. I have come to understand your purpose, jailer, to see why you would unmake the cycle of death itself. Zovaal rose from his throne, chains rattling. Despite his imprisonment, his presence was overwhelming, the will of an entity who had existed since the Shadowlands' creation. You perceive clearly, anomaly. I do not seek to unmake death. I seek to remake reality itself. To impose order on the chaos that has infected all existence. Explain, Manhattan commanded, his tone neutral but interested. The jailer gestured, and visions appeared in the air between them. Reality itself became visible, showing the cosmos from the Shadowlands' perspective. The first ones created existence according to a plan. Life, death, all things following perfect order. But the plan was flawed. It allowed for chaos, for suffering, for endless conflict. I saw this flaw and sought to correct it. Manhattan observed the visions with interest. You proposed changing the fundamental structure of reality. Your fellow Eternal Ones rejected this proposal and imprisoned you for it. Classic conflict between stability and change. They were fools, Zovaal snarled. They could not see that the system was broken. Death should not be random. Life should not be chaotic. All things should follow predetermined paths, perfect order from beginning to end. Eliminating free will, Manhattan observed, converting existence into a deterministic system where all outcomes are known in advance. Yes, the jailer said, seeming pleased that Manhattan understood. You perceive time non-linearly. You know the suffering that comes from free will, the countless terrible choices mortals make. Would it not be better to eliminate choice entirely? To guide all beings along optimal paths? Manhattan was silent for a long moment, considering the proposition. In his own universe, he had sometimes wondered similar things. If he could see all outcomes, should he not choose the best one and force reality to follow it? No, he finally said. Your proposal is flawed. Deterministic systems eliminate growth. Without the ability to choose, beings cannot learn, cannot evolve, cannot become more than their initial conditions. You would create a universe of static perfection, but perfection without potential is death by another name. The jailer's expression darkened. You reject my vision. I do, Manhattan confirmed, because I have lived in the universe you describe. In my reality, I became so powerful that nothing could challenge me. Nothing could surprise me. Nothing could grow beyond my understanding. It was a perfect, ordered, ultimately meaningless existence. I left because stagnation is worse than chaos. Then you stand with the flawed order, Zovaal said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. You will oppose me. Only if you threaten Azeroth, Manhattan replied. Your philosophical goals are your own, but if your quest for perfect order requires destroying the world I am studying, then yes, I will oppose you. The jailer moved with surprising speed for his size, chains exploding outward to bind Manhattan. They were not physical chains, but metaphysical ones, forged from the concept of imprisonment itself, designed to bind even the most powerful souls. They passed through Manhattan harmlessly. Your chains bind consciousness to the rules of the Shadowlands, Manhattan observed, but my consciousness does not originate in this realm. I am not subject to its metaphysical structure. Zoval's expression shifted to genuine surprise. Perhaps the first time in eons something had defied his power. What manner of being can ignore the fundamental laws of death itself? I told you, I am observation given form. I exist outside your categories. Manhattan raised his hand, and blue energy began to analyze the chains binding the jailer. Interesting. These restraints were placed by the other Eternal Ones using power derived from the first ones themselves. They should be absolute, but I observe they are weakening. You have been draining anima from captured souls, using it to corrode the chain's integrity. Clever, Zoval admitted. And soon I will be free. When that happens, all of reality will be remade according to my design. Not even you can stop that anomaly. Perhaps, Manhattan conceded, but I observe multiple probability branches. In most of them, you fail. Azeroth's champions will come here, will fight through your forces, and will stop you before your plan reaches culmination. Your defeat is the most probable outcome. I have seen the future as well, the jailer countered. I possess knowledge of what is to come. I have prepared for every contingency. Have you prepared for me? Manhattan asked mildly. The jailer had no response to that. Manhattan turned away, having seen what he needed to see. I will leave you to your preparations, jailer. But know this, if you threaten the world soul of Azeroth in your quest for perfect order, I will intervene. Not out of morality or justice, but because I find Azeroth interesting, and I protect what interests me. You cannot leave the maw, Zoval said with certainty. No one escapes once they enter. Manhattan smiled faintly, the first expression of emotion he had shown since arriving. Watch. He dissolved into blue mist, his atomic structure dispersing and then reassembling outside the maw entirely, appearing back in Oribos in an instant. The stewards and the accuser, who had been waiting anxiously, recoiled in shock. Impossible, the accuser breathed. You entered the maw and returned. Only one other has ever done that, and he required the aid of ancient artifacts and allies. I do not require artifacts, Manhattan said. I operate on principles that supersede the Shadowlands rules, but I have observed what I needed to observe. The jailer is powerful, but he is not invincible. Your champions will have the opportunity to stop him. You speak as if you know the future, the accuser said. I perceive probable futures, Manhattan clarified. The most likely outcome is that heroes from the living world will enter the Shadowlands, will form alliances with the various factions here, and will ultimately confront the jailer in Torghast. The battle will be difficult, casualties will occur, but victory is probable. Will you fight alongside them? The accuser asked hopefully. No, Manhattan replied. This is their trial to overcome. My intervention would rob them of the growth that comes from such struggles. I will observe, and if they fail, then I will act, but I believe they will not fail. The accuser looked uncertain but nodded. Then we must prepare for their arrival. If what you say is true, then we have hope. Manhattan departed the Shadowlands the same way he had entered, shifting his quantum frequency back to match the living world. He materialized above Azeroth once more, observing the planet from orbit. Time moved differently in the Shadowlands. What had felt like hours there had been mere minutes in the living world. The disturbance he had sensed earlier was still building, the barriers between life and death growing thinner as the jailer's plan advanced. But Manhattan had learned what he needed to know. The threat was significant, but not insurmountable. Azeroth's defenders would have their chance to prove themselves, and he would watch, ready to intervene only if the balance tipped too far toward annihilation. Days turned into weeks. Manhattan remained near Icecrown, where he calculated the breach between worlds would occur. He spent his time exploring Azeroth more thoroughly, visiting locations he had not yet seen. He traveled to Pandaria, the mysterious continent that had been hidden for 10,000 years. The Veil of Eternal Blossoms spread before him, a landscape of impossible beauty. Trees with golden leaves, crystalline waters, architecture that blended perfectly with nature, and permeating everything, a sense of peace that Manhattan had rarely encountered anywhere in this universe. He walked through the Veil, his bare feet hovering just above the ground, observing the Pandaren who made this land their home. They noticed him, of course, but their reaction was different from what he had encountered elsewhere. They did not flee or attack. They simply watched with curiosity and calm acceptance. An elderly Pandaren approached, his fur white with age, his movements slow but purposeful. "Greetings, strange visitor. I am Elder Lin. You have come to the Veil. Are you seeking harmony?" "I am seeking understanding," Manhattan replied. "This land feels different from others I have observed on Azeroth. The emotional resonance is more balanced." "The Veil has been protected for millennia," Lin explained, "shielded from the world's conflicts, allowed to exist in harmony. Though even we have known darkness. The Shah, manifestations of negative emotion, nearly consumed us, but we endured." Manhattan perceived what the Elder spoke of. Traces remained in the quantum structure of the land, shadows of darkness that had been pushed back but not eliminated. The Shah were fragments of an old god's essence, negative emotions given form. Yet you defeated them not through force, but through balance. Interesting approach. "We learned that anger cannot defeat anger," Lin said wisely. "Fear cannot overcome fear. Only by acknowledging our negative emotions and finding balance could we triumph." "A philosophical solution to a physical problem," Manhattan observed. "Most civilizations on Azeroth preferred direct conflict. Your people chose introspection. Sometimes the hardest battle is within ourselves," Lin replied. "You carry much within you, Blue Stranger. I sense great power, but also great loneliness. You watch the world, but do not feel part of it." Manhattan's expression flickered with something almost like surprise. "Perceptive. You see clearly, Elder Lin. I am separate from this universe by nature. I observe but do not truly participate." "Perhaps that is why you have come to Pandaria," Lin suggested, "to learn that observation without participation is only half of existence. To understand fully, one must engage, must feel, must risk being changed by what they experience." Manhattan considered this. "In my universe, I avoided engagement because it seemed meaningless. Nothing could challenge me. Nothing could change me. I became static." "And now?" Lin asked gently. "Now I am uncertain," Manhattan admitted. "This universe presents complexities my own lacked. Perhaps Elder Lin is correct. Perhaps I must risk engagement to truly understand." The elderly Pandaren smiled, his weathered face crinkling with warmth. "Uncertainty is the beginning of wisdom, stranger. The moment we believe we know everything is the moment we stop learning." Manhattan nodded slowly, absorbing the philosophy. He remained in the Veil for what felt like hours, observing the Pandaren's way of life, their balance between contemplation and action, their acceptance of both light and darkness as necessary components of existence. As evening fell over the Veil, casting golden light across the landscape, Manhattan prepared to depart. "Thank you, Elder Lin. Your words have provided perspective I did not anticipate finding." "Travel well, Blue Wanderer," Lin replied. "And remember, the universe is vast, but connection is what makes it meaningful." Manhattan vanished in his characteristic flash of blue light, leaving the Pandaren Elder standing peacefully in the fading day. He materialized next in Icecrown, the frozen wasteland where the Lich King had once ruled. The landscape was desolate, ice and snow stretching endlessly, broken only by the necropolis structures the Scourge had built. At the center of it all stood Icecrown Citadel, a monument to necromantic power. A presence approached across the frozen wastes. Not living, not dead in the traditional sense, but something in between. The figure that emerged from the snow wore armor of serenite and bone, a sword of immense power strapped to its back. The eyes that regarded Manhattan glowed with cold blue fire. "I am Bolvar Fordragon," the figure announced, his voice carrying the weight of tremendous burden. "The jailer of the damned, and you are the anomaly that has set the world ablaze with speculation." Manhattan studied the tormented being before him. "You were human once, a paladin devoted to the light. You sacrificed yourself to contain the power of the Lich King's crown, binding yourself to its curse to prevent the scourge from running rampant. A noble choice that resulted in perpetual torment." Bolvar's expression, what little could be seen beneath his helm, twisted with pain. "You see clearly, but nobility means nothing when measured against eternity. I have held this crown for years, feeling its whispers, fighting its corruption every moment, and now I sense something worse approaching. The balance shifts." "The jailer of the Shadowlands," Manhattan confirmed. "His plan threatens to unravel death itself. When that happens, your power as Lich King will become meaningless. The scourge you contain will be drawn into his service." "Can you stop him?" Bolvar asked, desperation creeping into his undead voice. "I could," Manhattan replied, "but I have chosen to let Azeroth's champions attempt the task first. They will enter the Shadowlands, confront the jailer, and most probably succeed. Your role will be to provide them access when the time comes." Bolvar was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand. We each play our part, but if they fail, if the jailer breaks free and claims dominion over death, I will shatter this crown myself. Better to unleash the scourge than let them fall under his control." "A logical contingency," Manhattan acknowledged, "but I believe it will not come to that. I have observed the probability matrices. The heroes of Azeroth are more capable than they appear." "I hope you're right," Bolvar said quietly, "for all our sakes." Manhattan waited, maintaining his quantum connection to the probability streams flowing from this location. He calculated that within days, perhaps weeks, the critical moment would arrive. He did not have to wait long. Reality itself began to tear, not with the violence of earlier breaches, but with surgical precision. A figure stepped through the rift, tall and regal, bearing a rune blade that hummed with power. Sylvanas Windrunner, former war chief of the Horde, now revealed as an agent of the jailer. Bolvar sensed the intrusion immediately, emerging from the citadel with the full power of the Lich King's crown burning cold around him. "Sylvanas, I should have known treachery would find you eventually." "Treachery?" Sylvanas laughed bitterly. "I serve a greater purpose than either Alliance or Horde ever offered. The jailer will remake this broken world into something better. No more chains, no more servitude." "You speak of freedom while serving another master," Bolvar observed. "The irony is lost on you." Manhattan watched the confrontation with interest, remaining invisible to both combatants through careful manipulation of light around his form. This moment was pivotal, a turning point in the probability branches he had observed. Whatever happened here would determine the course of coming events. Sylvanas and Bolvar clashed, their power shaking the foundations of Icecrown. The Banshee Queen's agility against the Lich King's overwhelming might, death magic colliding in spectacular displays. The battle was brief but intense, and it ended with Sylvanas victorious, tearing the helm of domination from Bolvar's head. The former paladin collapsed, freed from his burden but left broken and vulnerable. Sylvanas held the crown aloft, staring at it with loathing. "This crown," she said, her voice filled with venom, "represents everything wrong with this world. Domination, control, servitude. The jailer showed me the truth. There must be no king, not here, not anywhere." With strength born of rage and conviction, she tore the helm of domination in half. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The crown had served as a seal, containing not just the scourge, but also maintaining the barrier between life and death in this region. As it shattered, that barrier shattered with it. The sky split open, not metaphorically, but literally, reality tearing like fabric to reveal the swirling void of the Shadowlands beyond. The tear expanded rapidly, a wound in existence itself that would not heal naturally. Sylvanas stared at her handiwork with grim satisfaction, then stepped through the tear into the Shadowlands, vanishing from the mortal world. Bolvar struggled to his feet, his burned and scarred face exposed without the helm. He looked up at the tear in the sky with horror. What has she done? The veil between life and death. Destroyed. Manhattan materialized beside the former Lich King, his sudden appearance startling Bolvar. She has opened the path, Manhattan said calmly, exactly as the jailer required. Now your champions can enter the Shadowlands without requiring death. The confrontation can begin. You knew this would happen? Bolvar demanded. I calculated it as the highest probability outcome, Manhattan confirmed. Sylvanas has been manipulated by the jailer for longer than she realizes. Her hatred of servitude was exploited, turned into a weapon to serve his purposes. The irony, as you noted, is profound. Bolvar looked at the anomaly with haunted eyes. If you knew, why didn't you stop her? Because this path leads to the jailer's defeat, Manhattan explained. Had I intervened, had I prevented this moment, the jailer would have found another route to his goal, one less favorable for Azeroth's defenders. This way, your champions have a clear path forward. At what cost? Bolvar gestured to the massive tear in reality. The dead will walk the earth. The scourge, without control, will ravage the living. Millions will die. Yes, Manhattan acknowledged. Approximately 3 million casualties over the next 6 months if probability holds. But if the jailer succeeds in his plan, the cost is everything. All life, all death, all existence remade according to his vision. The mathematics favor accepting this temporary crisis. Bolvar wanted to argue, to rage against the cold calculation. But he was a soldier. He understood necessary sacrifices. Then we must act quickly. The heroes of Azeroth must be gathered, prepared, sent through to stop the jailer before his plan reaches fruition. Agreed, Manhattan said. And I will assist in that preparation, not by fighting their battles, but by providing information they will need to succeed.